Right, how we doing now? Jeez, we don't have long left, do we, folks? Hmm? Only a couple of weeks. What have we got? This week, and then 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks before Easter, and then we have a week after Easter. Yeah, not really. We'll be wound down by then, I think. Um, anyway, I hope all's going well with your teams. I assume you're all having your WhatsApp, Zoom, MS Teams meetings and all that sort of stuff. Yeah? Some people saying yes, some people nodding. I'll take it as a given that you are meeting up anyway. You're using the hour on Thursday productively. Anyway, so today, what am I going to talk about today? Well, let's get down here and see what we're going to do. And we'll open the show. You'll be delighted to know. Let's get on to failure. Oh, Jesus. Oh, God. Let's enlarge these PowerPoints so we can make some sense of it. Anyway, failure. Learning from failure, which is more important. Now, um, I don't know. I don't know what your exam results are like in the first semester and all this sort of stuff. Last year, how many of you are repeating modules, or how many of you are repeating parts of your modules, and so on. But in any case, you will probably have some setbacks. Now, a failure doesn't mean necessarily getting below 40% and bang, having to repeat a module. A failure might be you only getting 57% and you're thinking you should have gotten 67%. I mean, to you, that's a failure. To someone else, I would say, Jesus, you passed it, for heaven's sake. Now, I do joke about things like this and saying that anything more than 40% is a waste of effort, because you still get the 5 credits or 10 credits and so on. It's just the way the system works and all that sort of stuff. But in any case, yes, we do have failures. We have constantly are faced with challenges. That's why even your mental attitude towards these things. Do you look at them as failures? Because even the word failure immediately conjures up a negative emotion. And how can I'm 61 years of age, closer to the exit than the entrance. But the point about my attitude towards failure, I don't think of it the word of failure. I think of the opportunity. It's a challenge. It goes shit faced. So what happens? Crap happens. But it's how quickly you really get back up and say, right, it's not going to happen again. Or I won't do it that way. I'll do it differently, rather than making excuses. Now, this is one of the things that have crept in the last 15, 20 years, and in terms of mentality and people's views of things. Blaming something else, blaming others, blaming the system, blaming processes, blaming this, that, and well, I shouldn't have said blaming processes. Most of the time processes do fail. But making excuses, essentially, and not taking ownership, and just putting hands up and saying, yep, fucked up, my fault, bang, I need to get on with it. I know I'm using language, and some people say, oh, shocker. Shouldn't be. I find that inappropriate. I don't give a rat's ass. That's what happens. Things go wrong. They don't go according to expectations. Therefore, what do I do to avoid that from happening again? That's essentially your attitude towards failure is really important. It's not the actual failure itself. It will have consequences. Might lose some money, might lose some assets or whatever, but it's your attitude is what's important. So when you look at a failure, try and dispel the word immediately and say, look, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity that could have gone better. And even just by thinking in those terms. Now, I'm not a qualified psychologist. As I said, I've just got a bucket loads of years of experience and quite a few failures as well. And I'll let you in a secret. I actually failed my second year exams on my MBA. I had to repeat the exam, and it was all or nothing. You get 2 attempts, and if you don't get the second attempt, that's it. 2 years down the tubes. Now, there were extenuating circumstances, but regardless, I was the one that was doing the exam. I'm the one that had to take the resit. Irrespective of all the other crap that was going on in my life at the time. Bottom line was, it was my responsibility, me, to make it right. And it became even more challenging because we worked in study groups. And that's the only way you can get through advanced degrees, as they call them, such as masters and definitely masters, and the likes of MBAs. You work in study groups and you share your knowledge and all that sort of stuff. And I couldn't do that. I had to a whole new case study, a whole new suite of criteria and so on and so forth. And I had to sit down and do it myself. And I had to spend the summer, well, 2 months of the summer, studying away for this. And here was the real kicker in it. When I was doing the exam along with one other guy, there was 18 of us in the actual cohort. The other guy wasn't doing it. He was doing the exam because it was a deferral for him. He couldn't take it on the first sitting. For me, it was a repeat. So there was the embarrassment of failing the exam. The only one of the 18 to have failed the first sitting, and letting down my colleagues and the team and so on. And I still had a dissertation to write. But there was no point in going into that, because if I failed the exam the second time, that's it. 2 years down the tubes. And a substantial amount of money investment gone down the tubes. I got there and I did well in the exam. However, it was capped at 40 rules and regulations. No matter how well you do in a repeat exam or a second attempt, you're still only capped at 40 in this instance. And here's my big brag. I still finished overall in the top 5% of my class. Work that out, 5% of 18. Was it because I'm brainy? No, because I worked hard. I wouldn't take failure, or I saw opportunities. This is not going to get the better of me. Fight back. So it's just a little moral lesson for you, because you have it all in front of you. It's behind me. Okay, so let's look at these. So what are our learning objectives? Describe what failure is and its effect on an entrepreneur themselves. Identify several different types and reasons of failure. Describe the consequences of fear of failure for entrepreneurs. Now, even though it says entrepreneurs, take this in the general context, not just. So when we talk about fear of failure, for anyone, okay? And then explain the different ways entrepreneurs can learn from failure, or people can learn from failure, and describe the significance of grit and, of course, its role in building tolerance for failure. So grit, your mettle, your determination. It's one of those kind of harsh words, and say, I'm going to go for it, kind of thing. How quickly we rebound. And then one of these. So 9 out of 10 businesses fail on average. That's about right. So can I come up with a foolproof plan? Create 10 business ideas, or create 10 businesses. Now, that's again an American attitude. You haven't succeeded until you've failed. Okay, that's all very fine in American culture, but it's different over on this side of the pond, as they say. We have different attitudes towards failure, both from ourselves and how we see people, or people perceive us. In terms of failure. We've come around a long way. Why? Because, for example, in the last financial crash, a lot of companies failed. Currently, companies are failing left, right and centre because of this bloody lockdown and so on. Anyone down in Cork the weekend, no? Or up in Dublin the week before? Should have gone there. Great crack. I don't know. Anyway, companies are failing. But back in the financial meltdown, when companies started to fail and banks started to come in and literally belittle people, telling them, I own you. Telling companies, you do as I say. I want every penny you have. Do you have any savings? Do you have any other source of income? I want it, I want it, I want it. This is the attitude of banks. Primarily Ulster Bank, as it happens. But the other banks as well. They were coming in. They were taking over swathes of businesses and putting their own people in some cases where they thought there might be a going concern. And of course, people were embarrassed because they lost their businesses, lost premises, lost assets, and so on, livelihoods, and so on. But eventually, it started to swing around. People were saying, have you had the bank in on you? Yeah. So it started to become a bit of a club. You had to be a member. You had to have had be under some kind of a restricted agreement with one of their lending agencies, banks or whatever, and it was a badge of honor. So that was an interesting twist of attitudes towards this, potential foreclosures and all that sort of stuff, and ownership of businesses, and it starts to change attitudes. So not so much that a failure is a success, as the Americans would approach it, but we've become far more tolerant of it, because we've found that really the behaviors of others, such as the banks in many cases, was totally outside of our controls, outside of reasonable business behavior, and something that you really couldn't do anything about. And unfortunately, lobbyists and so on didn't act fast enough to protect the small to medium-sized businesses and so on, and say nothing for startups and entrepreneurs. I mean, it was extremely difficult for companies around that particular time. And then, of course, what did we have? When we started to get things right around 2012, 2011, start putting mechanisms in place to build things back up, what happens? You have these con artists inside in Davy stockbrokers, and you've seen all the fallout from that and so on. But the problem is the knock-on effect it has on the wider society and people and business and so on. So the whole point about it is, yes, you're going to have failures. And we'll look at the reasons as to why you have some of these failures. So what a failure, generally conceived as the termination of a commercial organization that has missed its goals and failed to achieve investors' expectations. That's a real Americanism. Is it the same here? To a far lesser extent. But when we look at these, if you get time, and you really become bored or something like that, and have a look at Bloomberg TV, for example, and listen to some of the financial analysts talking. You don't have to spend hours at this, 15-20 minutes enough, and listen to them talk about, such and such a company has achieved its quarterly expectations, or their expectations were ahead of market, the company performed ahead of market expectations, and so on. Those kind of commentaries, like social media, it is still on TV nevertheless, those kind of commentaries can make and break companies, because they set the targets, and it's a sudden death. If you don't hit those targets, you're in trouble. And technically in the States, if you don't hit your targets for 2 quarters in succession, then you're in serious trouble. And it couldn't be further from the truth. It could be for dozens of reasons. But these pseudo experts seem to dictate that this is the case. These so-called investment analysts and so on from the various banks and consultancies and so on, they have that much power to make or break. And we actually, on a totally different, years ago when I was working in software engineering, myself and one of my colleagues decided, we had a bunch of new graduates in, and we said, let's test the system. Could we make one of these people into a senior engineer within a year? And lo and behold, we did. And you know what we did was, now he had brains, he was good. So was the girl that was in that group. But we talked them up. We started dropping the words to the right people, and it just goes to show the power of communication. And if you get the right network and saying it to the people and so on and so forth, they keep blurting out, and you reinforce the belief that these people are better than the average, and as a consequence, they get promoted. It works. But that's what happens in these things. So look at the effects of failure. So there are pros and cons to all of these. Now, this is not a particularly long lecture today, so don't worry about it, folks. Bear with it. But the pros, it intensifies cognitive process. So when you have a failure, you go into more in-depth analysis, what's going on, and you become aware of what's happening more effectively. So you get the feelings, you get the intuitions as to something going wrong. Therefore, I must improve. I must avoid these pitfalls next time. So you don't walk into the same problem eyes wide open or shut, whatever the case may be. Learning resulting from improvements or resulting in improvement. So we analyze why we failed. We learn from that, and that's the important thing. We all make mistakes. We all fail at things, and the important point is how effectively or what have we learned. You know, Einstein's definition of stupidity: doing the same experiment over and over and expecting a different result. You know, and it's the same. This is the same thing. Do we learn from it? Motivation to start another, and oftentimes we say, that was a mistake, I shouldn't have done that, I need to get this right, and you actually get more motivated to want to get it right the second time and the third time and so on. Some of the cons, as they call it here, the negatives on failures are, it can be financially costly. Yes and no. Yes, it'll cost you some money, but nowadays, because the way investments are divvied out, handed out to startups and to entrepreneurs, it's in piecemeal. So you won't lose much money proportionally. I mean, if you went back into the early 2000s, just before the dot-com bubble burst, people were investing, millions, hundreds of millions into startups and companies like that, and bang, it was gone in a flash. Literally, weeks, months, companies were folding with huge investments, and investors learn from that and not making that mistake again. So to say, right, show me what you've got, and next stage, and next stage, and next stage. So financially, it's not as costly because of the way investors invest in companies, and particularly in startups. It can be emotionally painful. If you let it, it will. If you wallow in the self-pity, then of course it can be emotionally painful for yourself, but also for people around you. If you're constantly in that negative space or that negative mindset, I mean, and remember, when it fails, it immediately becomes history, and you start to live in the past. You can't. You need to take today onwards, not go backwards and start wallowing. We learn from experiences, whether it is positive or negative, and we move on. And it can decrease inclination for risk taking. And say, yeah, well, you got your fingers burned once, would you burn them a second time? Of course not. But if you have a sufficient learning and so on, then of course you will want to take risk again. Say, well, I know now, I can mitigate. I've done it a couple of times. I can see where the real issues are, and I can avoid them. So in other words, you reduce the risk with experience. And these are just the top 20 reasons for startup fails. And I need to put on my glasses so as I can see what I'm looking at here, just to pop them down. I'm not going to go through all of them. Well, the top one is no market need. Coming up with some stupid idea, and of course, and it's 42%. Not listening to the customers. That's why I talk about interacting and the business model canvas. The whole premise of that methodology is get out of the building, talk to your customers, understand what they actually want, and try internalize that, and then deliver a product or service that meets their needs. And oftentimes this is what happens. It doesn't go right. People get so enveloped in their own ideas that they ignore what they're being told and make mistakes, and end up finding, oh Jesus, actually nobody wanted this crap. Ran out of cash. Biggest problem, and that's often referred to as your cash burn. And of course, when people invest, and that's the whole point. It's like I always come back to my simple example of building a house. You get it in stage payments, and if you run out of money before you have the roof built, and you got a tranche of money before your next stage payment, then you're going to hit this barrier. What am I going to do? You might have to bridge and so on. So managing your finances, micromanaging your finances is extremely important, such that you don't run out of cash. And going down through all of these, get out competed. That can happen. You could be just talking to friends in a pub, talking too loudly, and somebody overhears your idea. Bang, they're out there ahead of you. Or someone has spotted your idea and said, I can do that much more efficiently. I can do it more cost effectively, and I get out competed. So you have to be very careful who and where you talk to about your ideas and so on. And then, of course, you go down to these price and cost issues. Not doing your homework. Getting the price wrong, not covering enough, making enough profit to cover all your overheads, or get the costs you miscalculated. Some of your costs is costing more than you actually budget or plan for, and so on. So the list goes down right down to the last one down, which is failure to pivot. Now that concept of pivot is solely attributable to this business model canvas. In other words, a change of direction. You remember I mentioned about these Harvard business students wanting to build a robotic lawnmower, and they were so enveloped. They made all of these mistakes, which was interesting coming from business students. But they made the mistakes. They want to sell this for something like $25,000, and as I said, they can get a couple of Mexicans across the border, cut their lawn for $12. Why would you spend $25,000 for a robotic lawnmower? Because you can, maybe, I don't know. But the whole point about it was, there was no market at that level. The entry price point was way too high, obviously, and they wouldn't have made enough sales to justify the productions of all this sort of stuff. So it ended up that they pivoted. In other words, they created a newer machine that would dig weeds out of carrot drills or rows and so on, and that was a pivot. And sometimes we pivot with the market. We begin to analyze the feedback from customers and find, well, actually, these group of people over here, they're more interested in our product, so we'll change our market from single white female to mid-aged multi-ethnic males and females, for argument's sake. So you begin to see different trends and different moves in the market, and you have to be able to respond to those. That's also can be considered to be a pivot, changing your whole market segment across to a new segment. So there are a whole range of other reasons in behind there, but you can see the top of the biggest one of the no market need. 42% of failures, not analyzing, not doing the very first thing, exactly the stuff that you guys are doing. You have a proposition, you think there's a market, test it. Does the market exist? Do people want to buy the stuff we want to sell them, the product or the service? And getting that wrong accounts for 42%. So putting the homework in, then everything falls in place after that. So you've identified, yeah, there is a market. Yeah, they want our product. So you become more motivated, excited about it, and more people are become interested in buying your product, and so on. All the rest of the stuff becomes easier. All the other 7 boxes of the business model canvas become easier to fill and populate, and in other words, get done. So critical thinking question. How could that be about critical thinking? Not at 4 o'clock on a Monday or Tuesday afternoon, but imagine one or more failure scenarios for a business of your own. How do you think you would respond to the threat of failure? It is a question you can ask yourselves and say, like, well, having listened to my speeches and rants and so on and so forth, has there been anything I would have said to you that would have changed your attitude? I'm not looking for an answer, but this is how you might start to think about things differently. And say, well, it isn't the end of the world. So what? I failed a module. I can retake it. Well, years ago when we used to be on campus, Jesus, it was a couple of years ago now at this stage when I think about it. Around Rag Week, people used to have these T-shirts, and I always thought it was funny. What was it again? You can always repeat an exam, but you can't repeat a good party. It was, absolutely, students are students, that's life. But technically, it's correct. You have to have a certain balance and enjoyment. So, okay, yeah, I had a good party night before the exams. I went in and made a horse's ass of the exams. But you become more determined, so it's not going to happen the next time, hopefully. So anyway, we have these 3 types of mistakes and the reasons for failure. The psyche mistakes, waiting too long mistakes, and hiring mistakes. Now, let's have a look at these. The psyche, your emotion, your mental state of exams. So oftentimes it's fear, the fear of failure. Letting opinions cloud your purpose. More so letting others' opinions, letting people domineer your thoughts, or dominate your thoughts more precisely, and with their opinions, and it begins to cast doubt. So your mental process become confused because different people are saying different things. Um, a second now, let us get this. My eye is a little bit of cream. Um, Trusting by default. Oh, that's an interesting one. Trusting people. You're getting this at the moment. There's major issues around cyber fraud because these fraudsters are excellent at building trust. The way they come across, it can be so convincing. Pure con artists. But we have an inherent, how to say, disposition to trust people without reason. It's kind of one of the more positive attributes of human nature, that we tend to trust people, and then we get let down. We get our fingers burned, and we say, not a second time, and we start putting up defense mechanisms, and we find trusting people becomes more and more difficult. Do I have the answers for all of that? Absolutely not. I Again, it's been years of experience, years of living and looking at the signs and say, yeah, that's someone I could trust, or I don't. There's something not right there. So I suppose the solution you have is your gut feeling. If something doesn't feel right, that doesn't give you reason to trust a person, then run 1,000 miles, or at least don't be so free with your trust to someone else. As I say at the start of the semester, trust me, I'll get you through this. Of course, you all trust me implicitly. Well, all 34 of you that are here today, the other 30 odd people, I don't know where they are. So not believing in myself, and the biggest mistake I made was as an entrepreneur. So and confidence, and God knows, for ye young folk, some of you will be bursting with confidence. Some of you will be very short of confidence. But I can guarantee you one thing: when you come out the back door of this in 2 years' time or 3 years' time, whatever the case may be, and you have a degree, your confidence is going to go up. Why? Because you've proved that you're able to study, you're able to pass exams, you're able to meet the grade. Then you might go on and do a master's, or you go on and get a job. So each of these experiences start to build your confidence, but you have to believe in yourself. You have to have that it comes from so many other aspects of our lives, whether it's determination, motivation, grit, all of this stuff we'll briefly touch later on. When you have all these mixed together, they underpin your self-belief. Now, as I said, it's a level of confidence. And please God, do not cross the line and become arrogant. Look how good I am. I am this. I'm the cock-a-hoop. Whatever the cock-a-hoop is. Anyway, that you're strutting along. Head up in the air. Don't go down that road. It's a waste of effort. But you do have to believe in yourself, and you can start to build that belief and trust. By small accomplishments. You don't need mega performances. You just need small, simple steps, and it builds and builds gradually. And I will tell you, again, an insight. I don't have any problems sharing deep, inner, personal thoughts and things and so on, simply because it might benefit you, might not. But in any case, I'm going to tell you, I would have been an extreme introvert, particularly around your age. During my teenage years, before, through secondary school, I was a joker. And you probably get hints of this. I have a bit of crack and so on. That was my defense mechanism. Back in those days, when, in the 70s, you sank or swam. And if you couldn't defend yourself, you better be able to run fast. Oh, we kicked the living shite out of each other, in school. Now you'd have the parents down. Oh, going to sue the school and all that sort of shit. Jesus, right? As I used to say to my own sons when they came home with a black eye, I said to them, I hope the other bloke has 2 black eyes. Someone say, you shouldn't be promoting violence. Crying out loud. In any case, Yes, humor was one of my defense mechanisms. And then as I got through my 20s, I had a kind of an inferiority complex. Again, it was manifesting itself in an introverted type person, predominantly. However, as time went on and stages of life went through and so on and so forth, I started to challenge myself, and particularly academically. And then I went, I was 40 when I was doing my MBA, and I was 45, 46, I think, when I started my PhD, and 48, I think it was when it took me just over, marginally over 3 years to do my PhD, which was pretty fast. Again, he said, oh, he's bragging again. No, he's not. Because I had a lot of experience at that stage in my life. Now, the point about it I'm making is that with each of those little bits of paper, that's really all it was give me a badge to say, you can do it. Now, if you asked any of my colleagues, friends that I still keep in touch with from those 70s, that 70s show, oh, jeez, why did Mark do a doctorate? And they will tell you for the laugh. And you're looking at me now saying, geez, we haven't even gotten our degrees and you did a doctorate for the laugh. Yeah, in a manner of speaking, yeah. I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. When I was in my 20s, I said, an MBA, geez, wouldn't it be great to have one of those? Little did I know, 10, 15 years down the road, that I would be doing one. And doing one with relative ease. And why did I think I was doing it with ease? Because I was super intelligent? Horse's ass. I did it because I had a lot of experience. So I was able to apply it more effectively. And then doing the doctorate because other people had more faith in me than I had in myself. But it gave me that level of confidence. And to the point that I will tell people anything. Not that I bullshit. I'll tell them anything they want to know. I'm comfortable in sharing stuff. I'm comfortable talking about failures because I know it can benefit people. Some people say, oh, Jesus, it's not all negative and doom and gloom. Of course it's not. As I said, there's more than one way to skin a cat. I even joke about the fact that I was in my 40s when I was doing, my masters and doctors and still studying. And I say, I'm a slow learner. In my day, if a slow learner existed, it was a special bus to Cashel. Now, geez, you have to be careful about what you're saying to it nowadays on the special bus. But back then, it was a serious social stigma. But anyway, it's not the case. Anyway, I talked about that. So, not believing yourself, the trust and belief in yourself and building your confidence it's important, and I know some of you will be on the introverted scale and some of you will be on the extroverted scale, but you compensate. And to this day, I am still predominantly an introvert. Okay. Not as much as I was 10, 15 years ago. I still do the test. It's always nice to get some measure of myself. Yourself when you're doing it for yourselves. So thinking that entrepreneurship was the most meaningful part of my life, that's sometimes we can be obsessed with what we're doing and we lose sight of other things in our lives that actually matter, such as friends, family, colleagues, relationships, sports, and so on. We become consumed with one singular focus. Entrepreneurship, this is what I want to do. And when you stand back, you wonder, are you doing this for your own self-fulfillment? Or are you trying to appease or impress others? Or do you like the sound of an entrepreneur? What's his name? Duncan Ballantyne from the Dragon's Den. He grew up in Glasgow, I think it was. He said they couldn't even spell the word. He didn't know what an entrepreneur was, but he said, I want to be one of them. So it's the buzz. Anyway, waiting too long mistakes. That's the other type. So we have all those psyche, the mental stuff, and then we have these real mistakes, waiting too long. Biggest mistake as an entrepreneur was waiting too long to start. Getting that get up and go mentality. Being willing to want to take a risk. And so what? You fail, or so what? You succeed. but sitting around thinking, and I would say, one of my failings is I can procrastinate. I can think about stuff and spend too much time thinking and talking to myself. I don't talk to too many other people. Talking to myself about stuff. That's procrastination. Not getting out, just getting on with it. To hell with the consequences. Just do it. You know, Not pivoting soon enough. Well, okay, that's not realizing that I should have taken a change in direction. Blah, blah, blah. And waiting to see if problem will resolve itself. Hoping that things will go away. Hoping that instead of leaving control to externalities and others, let someone else handle the problem, and eventually this problem will go away, and so on and so forth. It won't unless you make it, particularly if it's in your own business. You've got to work around it and find a solution, find a way of resolving whatever the issue is, and move on. Otherwise, you're going down the tubes. This one is pretty straightforward. Hiring the wrong dingbats into your company. The wrong marketing people, wrong HR, wrong finance. You might have someone that's extremely technical, that's of benefit to your organization. However, what could be happening is they may not have the personality. They may not fit in. So the personal fit as well as the professional fit is extremely important. So getting the hiring right and the rate at which you hire people becomes important as well. You don't want to have a whole army working for you and you can't generate enough income. People become demotivated, blah, blah, blah. Or at the same time, you don't want to just have enough people because everyone becomes under pressure. So evaluating what you have, when you need them, and how often. You don't hire a HR manager and a finance manager and a market manager all at once. Oftentimes you might be outsourcing your finance, and that person who's doing finance might know somebody or also has done a bit of HR for other companies. They can do that for you as well. So you build it bit by bit by bit. Okay? So failure spectrum, as we call it. Now, these are just some of the components, deviance in the spectrum, inattention, lack of ability, process inadequacy, and uncertainty, and exploratory experiments. So these are all these famous companies. Napster, you most certainly should have heard of. What was it? What was that movie? The Core. Wasn't that your man that said he founded Napster and all that sort of stuff? It's just a music platform. It's the forerunner to Spotify and so on. So I think it's still around today. But again, they tried to be. It failed because it went down different routes and it tried to be totally rebellious and all that sort of stuff. Audience Bloom, another one of these platforms. These are all technology platforms, all of these, for various customer and lead generation. Niblet's the same thing. They didn't know how to actually evaluate customers. ILO, I think, and IntelliBank were something in the area of questionnaires and surveys and trying to analyze the market and all this sort of stuff. And again, they failed miserably. And ShortStack. Be careful when you look up ShortStack or when you Google it. It has a couple of meanings. One of it's a company and the other one has it's related to, I'm not going to say. But it brought a smile to my face. Oh, name of God, where did it come up with these expressions? But anyway, exploratory experimentation, not exploring in the wrong areas. Okay, that's basically where it comes down to. But the IntelliStack, there was something I'd noted about that one. Just bear with me a second, folks. Yeah, where am I? And it's is it here or was it there? Oh, here it is there. What was it? Just bear with me a second. I just bounce back into here. Yeah. In IntelliBank. Come back to me. I'm just waiting for my notes page to open here. Anyway, there were several reasons. The guy that founded this thing was a guy called Gary Schwart, Swart. He's now an influencer. Anyway, this IntelliBank was something like your Dropbox, that type of thing. Upload stuff and share it around, all that sort of stuff. And he didn't focus on the market. Didn't know what quite right. He said even the best team with the best product will fail if the market doesn't exist. And they got the market wrong, so they were aiming at the wrong people. didn't validate their customers. So they focus more on their investors, tried to look after them and keep them happy instead of listening to the customers. What do the actual customers want to buy this thing in Telebank? He says, focus, focus, focus. Another one of the reasons. Best said by Mark Twain, if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. That's a really interesting saying by Mark Twain. If I had more time, because that is difficult. We can ramble on and write letters and write doctorates and write reports and write assignments and ramble on, but it's our ability to be able to synopsize that down and get meaningful information out of it, so as the reader is able to follow, able to understand, and isn't bored. And then aim to exceed customer expectations. They failed in that. Figured out streamlined metrics, so they didn't know what they were measuring. So, I mean, how many customers have we got this week? How many customers did we have last week? Where were they from? Get the data. Now, it's only the failings of Telebank itself, essentially. So it kind of captured a number of areas. So the fear of failure, we have the pain, the humiliation, the shame, guilt, self-blame, and anger. And yeah, we can. We said, Jesus, that happened again. Fuck. That's the anger side of it coming out. But we go through those phases, and the pain of losing money, losing assets, losing reputation, humiliation, shame, guilt, because it shouldn't have happened. I should have seen this coming. I made this mistake, and it was my decision, and therefore it had a negative consequence, my decision. Therefore, I blame myself, and then this all turns into anger. But the problem with this is not so much that these are obvious to a person as an entrepreneur, businessman, but they'll spill over into your private lives. These things, particularly the anger, it'll spill over into relationships. That's why I say you need to be really careful about. Hang on a second, I was just in full flow. What's this? I'll come back to that question. Comment. Where was I? Yes, anger. Be careful. This stuff can spill over into your personal lives. You don't want that happening. You need to be very, very careful. Draw the line. This is work. This is personal. Don't let the two of them get too much or too intertwined, because it will destroy relationships, undoubtedly. But at the same time, you need to be able to share. You can be extremely angry with something not gone right in your business and so on, but you can temper that back and share the issues, maybe through a conversation. But even at that, keep it limited. You don't want to be offloading to people. You don't want to be offloading to your partner or your friends and so on, because they find, oh, geez, another whinge fest or a moan fest from Mark again. Jeez, they'll run 1,000 miles. Okay. So have a temper. So get balance. And as I said, and I'm I suppose I'm not joking, but humor is a great solution or panacea for all of these issues. Try and find humor and stuff and so on. Learn to laugh at yourself. Okay, seriously, learn to laugh at yourself. I mean, Jesus, I do. So do many other people laugh at me. But look, you have to have a sense of humor. I promise you, it'll get you through the worst stages of shit that happens in life and so on. Hang on, let me get this going again properly. Come back to me. Let's close this thing down. And here we are. Yeah, learning from failures. And then entrepreneurs must separate personal life, as I just exacerbated. Accept failure as part of the learning process, look at it positively, and admit mistakes and move forward. Yep, mea culpa. My problem, and move forward. What do we learn from this, and take positive actions out of the mistakes. Critical thinking, not interested. You can critique yourselves as much as you want. Ask yourselves these questions. Okay. So the 10 signs you might have a fear of failure. So failing makes you worry about what other people might think. Failing makes you worry about what your ability to pursue the future you desire. So we begin to start having doubts. Failures begin to question our very existence is why we're doing this art and so on and so forth. But if we allow it, it will fester. It will consume our lives, our every thought, and it'll take up more space in your head each time you allow the failure to grow. And that's the whole point about it. Don't take control of it. Failure makes us worry about how smart or capable you are. Just because you fail doesn't mean you're any less smart or any less capable. The real beauty about it is the failure can actually show how smart you really are, how quickly. And it's not about having the smart side. It's how quickly we can adapt. It's all about speed and responsiveness and flexibility. How quickly we can adapt to a changing environment. Crap happens. How quickly can we modify it, change it, work it to our advantage, and move things forward in a more positive sense? That's what smartness is. Failing makes you worry about disappointing people whose opinion you value. For example, I know all of you people now would probably be in tears if you let me down and did bad assignments and just threw any old shite towards me. And I know you would be all upset about that. So the fear of disappointing me with a crappy assignment. But I know that that's not going to happen. Isn't that right? You tend to tell people beforehand that you don't expect to succeed in order to lower their expectations. Again, that's indicative of a lack of confidence in yourself. So don't be trying to play yourself down. Don't be over humble. Humility is fine, but don't overplay it. Okay, because you will create a level of doubt and mistrust in people. And because if you exceed and say, "Oh, Jesus, he was bullshit. He was well able to do that," and so on and so forth, that can tick people off as well. Okay? So once you fail at something, you have trouble imagining what you could have done differently to succeed. And that's a pretty tricky one. So essentially, what you're looking at is you need to be able to analyze why the failure happened. What could have been done differently? That's why you're doing these professional development part 1 and part 2 as part of a reflective practice approach. And that's the essence of reflective practice. What did I do previously? And how can I improve on the way I did what I did previously? Okay? And that's important. So we stand back and we analyze the process. We don't nail people. We don't criticize. We don't kill ourselves. We look at the way we did. Could I have done it differently? The outcomes might be the same. So what? But as long as you've tried something different in a different way, at least you're knocking off the different possibilities of how you're going about a problem. So what did I do previously, and how can I improve on the way I did what I did previously? Okay. So you often get the last minute headaches, stomach aches, and all the sort of the physiological manifestations of failures. So you're completing your preparation and so on. So you get nerves, the butterflies, for example. Going in to do a presentation, you get butterflies, you get nervous and so on. It's natural. You need elements of that because it's good for the system. Physiologically, some level of nerves is good, but and a little bit of stress is good because it gets us to think a little bit clearer. But it's when we become overwhelmed and we let stresses and anxieties build up in us, then they become consuming. They cloud our judgment and so on. So don't, in other words, things like don't put off until next week what you can do tomorrow kind of thing. So tackle them, get things out of the way and do things in small. And how do we mitigate practice our nerves about presentations? Practice. We get it and we go through it over and over until we're comfortable and say, now I know the stuff. Straight away, your exuberance and your motivation start to improve dramatically. And you come across an awful lot better. Why? Because you practice. But if you go into an interview and you haven't prepared, sure, you'd be a bag of nerves. Colostomy bags. And so we often get distracted by tasks that prevent you from completing your preparation, which, in hindsight, were not as urgent as they seem to. And that's the whole question of focus. So sometimes, and it's, and I'll admit that myself, it happens to me. I can get distracted. And worse again, when you're trying to do a bit of research, you see, so, oh yeah, that's interesting. Let's look at that. Before you know it, you've spent a half an hour, maybe a day, looking at stuff that really isn't that relevant or important to you. Just why? Because you probably lost the motivation as to why you want to do, or your mind was just distracted and off you went on a tangent. So you tend to procrastinate and run out of time to complete your preparation adequately. So talking about it, not doing. Action, action, action. Critical thinking, yeah, critique yourselves and think to yourselves till the cows come home. What steps would you take to get over the loss or failure of a business? So this GEM study, these next couple of slides I'll fly through these, but GEM is the Global Economic Monitor. It's you can access this online. It has data on all sorts of things, and it's a really powerful resource as such. But the lowest level of fear is in Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. I can understand the Caribbean, all right. I mean, they're so laid back, man. Oh my God. Let me think about that. Jesus, I don't believe I just did that. But anyway, yeah, they're much more laid back approach as such. Okay, the highest level of fear is in Asia, Oceania, and Europe. Okay, the United States falls somewhere in between. So here we have the biggest fears are in, well, we'll take in Europe and so on and so forth. It's because of our conditioning, culture, and so on. Much longer history as such in terms of business and economics compared to the rest of the world. So we do have that fear, and success is a measure of a person. Used to be. It has been changing in the last number of years. So, and here's just another map of the global fear of failure and where it resides. Now you can read that for yourselves. I'm not going to go through it now, but it gives you an idea of the most feared to the least feared areas. And this is just self-perceptions about entrepreneurs or entrepreneurships, perceived opportunities, or factor-driven, efficiency-driven, or innovation-driven. So we have these percentage of, so self-perceptions about entrepreneurship, 54% is about perceived opportunities. 40% is innovation-driven, for example. Does it tell you an awful lot? Not a huge amount, but it's between 18 and 64 years, interestingly. Now, if you were to overlay that with age profiles, you'll find that the younger groups are more fearful of failure compared to us old farts. We're less fearful of failure. Okay? But on the other side of it, younger folks, you will take risks far quicker than us old folks or older folks, because we want to analyze a little bit more, and we want to reduce risk far more effectively, and we feel that we don't have enough time to recover from failures. If I set up a business tomorrow morning and got it going for 2 years and so on, and something goes wrong, I'd be terrified. I said, Jesus, I'm coming up to retirement. God almighty, this thing can go pear-shaped. Whereas if you're a young kid, well, in your 20s, I said, brush yourself off. I can create another job and bounce back twice as big the next time around. I would say we'd have the fear of time against us. So learning from failure, be aware of shiny object syndrome, the baubles. Okay, just because it looks attractive, looks nice, might be made from pure rubbish. Okay. Fail fast, but not too fast. Okay, so when we say fail fast, don't let things, if it's time to wind down your business, say, we need to wind it down. We've been making loss for the last year or the last 6 months and so on. Let's not keep going as is. This isn't going to pick up. We've done all the analysis. Let's cut our losses and move on. Find your formula. So get the balance right. Balance between private, professional, the amount of effort you want to put in and not put in, and so on. And know who you are. Another reason why I get you to do these professional developments. Get to know who the hell you are yourself. Your self-awareness. What kind of a person? What kind of a leader? What kind of a follower? What are my learning styles? You've done some of these before you even came into my domain. But and be comfortable, with who you are. Don't try and create this alter ego. I mean, leave that to the Marvel comics. Alternative people, what do they call them? I can't think of it. Um, yeah, know who you are and be comfortable in it, as such, and be comfortable in people accepting you for who you are, not some pseudo person that you like to create about yourself, some mythical person, because you'll burn up emotional energy trying to portray that image of something that you actually aren't. And here's the killer of it: people will see through it anyway. Okay? And then learning from failure, find your deeper purpose, focus on others, and recognize when your approach is wrong. And the probably the other one, the important one there is not so much finding your deeper purpose. I mean, that's a little bit too philosophical and gone down tangents. But what are you really trying to do? But focus on others, because it's about building the team around you. And if you focus on other people, then you begin to get like-minded people and working off the same, or as I say, singing off the same hymn sheet. As I say, no team, no dream. Love that saying. Only came across that recently. Can't remember where. Oh yeah, it was on Texas Metal. If any of you watched that, they're like fast and loud, but they do all sorts of things. And I just heard a couple of guys there were doing a bit of new paneling for the car or for a truck, and one of them about that teams make dreams. That was an exceptional saying. And then recognize your approach is wrong. So when you know something is wrong, when you're not satisfied, when you read the signals from other people and things aren't going right, you need to be able to stand back and say, Mark, you're making a horse's ass of this. This is wrong. Seek counsel, talk to other people and get in feedback. And then lastly, we have this critical thinking. How do you think you'll be able to take the lessons learned from your failures and use them to attain more success in the future? Well, that's down to yourselves, how you'll actually take those. So you need to analyze, think them over, reflective practice. That's all we're talking about here. And then getting gritty. What the hell is this? Building your tolerance for failure. So building grit, determination, courage, conscientiousness, perseverance, resilience, excellence. And sadly, a couple of years ago, I actually had a student say, or some students come and say, but how do we build resilience? Go out and learn. Create failure. Be on a losing team. I won't say go off and purposely fail an exam until you come fighting back. But analyze what you've done in something that you're passionate about. Think why you're passionate about it. Why you keep going on. Why, for example, will you go out training in the middle of winter in dark, pissy nights and freezing your butt off? Why? Perseverance, courage, constant. That's grit, because you see the bigger picture. Why do we, cycle inside in a fucking conservatory or go out on a half decent weekend, thermal underwear and sweating our freaking heads off to cycle a bike? Why? Because we put kilometers in the leg bank, such that when we do actually get to ride the bikes in decent weather and after the April, when we're on the summer bikes, we're fit and ready. I go out and my bike is 11 kilos weight for my winter training, and it kills me. But I know when I get out my other bike, which is only 7 kilos, in April, I'll be flying it around the place. So I can see the bigger picture months before it's going to happen. So only if I put in the effort. And this is what this is about. It's the same thing in business and in your professions. You have to have those. And excellence, pushing yourself. Always wanting to improve. We all have different levels of excellence, what we want to achieve in terms. And most importantly, it's what you're happy with. What you're happy, and then say, well, yeah, I did this and I'm reasonably happy. We'll never be absolutely 100% happy. But it's at least it's a level we want to achieve that pushes ourselves, such to say. And remember when I talk about these 3 M's, your mission, mentor, and mirror. So at least at night when you look in the mirror and say to yourself, yep, I put in the effort, I got the result, didn't perform as well, didn't put these exercises in, should have done little bit more of that, but at least I understand now, I can have a good night's sleep. That's really what it comes down to in business, personal life, your sports, whatever you're doing. These kind of elements, getting the mixture of those right, and then come back and do it all over again. Okay, And that's how we progress, and we learn how to do it more efficiently, better, get better results, change some of our approaches, our techniques, and so on. And we find, yeah, that works better for me now. And boom, happy days. Matty Hayes, who's unfortunately dead. Right, folks, that's essentially the end of the lecture. And before I go, I did have a question. Just let me close down the world here and we get back up to the other area. And here we are back. Now, okay, folks, I will leave it at that. That's not too bad. 5:10, or 5:10. 2-hour lecture in an hour and 10 minutes. I'll let you go. Keep working on your assignments, and we will see you this time next week. All right, folks, take it easy. Cheerio.
Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Mark.